I'm Terry Kyle, the co-founder of WPX, independently tested as one of the fastest WordPress hosting companies that you can use today. It's a pleasure for me to welcome Dave Chesson from Kindlepreneur.com, who's a longtime WPX customer, to talk with Dave today about his business and his the change seeking in his life and his aspirations and his view on a whole bunch of things. So it's a pleasure to welcome Dave, who I have actually interviewed once before, I think about 3 years ago, and I'm going to get to some great questions for Dave. So I appreciate you joining me today, Dave. First question, can you just give us a very quick bio of your life so far?
Yeah, sure. Well, I started in the U.S. Navy. I did nuclear engineering on submarines. I then transferred into being a military diplomat. I specialized in China. I became fluent in Mandarin Chinese, so that was fun. And while I was in the military, I actually started working on building websites. It was kind of my wife and I a long time ago had this conversation, and the question was did I want to make a career out of the military? Was I working towards being an admiral or something like that? And I said no, and my wife said, well, then you're constantly moving, and and we're constantly separated. Maybe we can start looking at something where we as a family can be together. And so that's when I said, you know what, that's a great point. And I didn't want to jump out of one traveling 9-to-5 job to another traveling 9-to-5 job. And so I started learning about search engine optimization and website building. And I did that on the side while I was still full-time in the military. And then one day I was able to hit it where I was making more money from my online business than I was in the military. And that gave me the opportunity to get out of the military and be home full time. So I got my kids upstairs, which is great. I've been that one dad who, every Friday, when the kids have their little presentations, I'm like the one dad in the crowd that's actually there to be for them. And so that's been my absolute number one motivation.
Great. And we had an interview, as I said, a few years ago, Dave, and the question that I kicked myself for not asking you in that interview was, how on earth did you run an internet business from inside a submarine?
Well, actually, so I was done with the submarines when I stopped. That being said, though, I did write my first book while on a South Korean warship near the North Korean border. And that was kind of the thing. That's why I chose to do blogging and SEO as well as write books on Amazon, was because when I was in the military, I would deploy and I'd go out to sea, I would travel, and because of that, I could never build a business that required me at all times. I was in Korea at the time, so if I built a business that required me to be up when Americans were up, I could not do that. I couldn't build a business that was centered around like Facebook ads, because if I go out to sea, I can't let the Facebook ads run for a month without me even knowing what's going on. I mean, I might come back to a terrible bill. And so that's what really drove me to really love the idea of search engine optimization and website building, because it's something where I could work on those things while out to sea. I could write a whole bunch of articles, and maybe post them when I get back. But the business kept running without me, and it didn't require me. And that's why it was a perfect mesh for what I was doing in the military and where I was in the world.
Okay, good answer. Without giving away any military secrets that might land you in prison, Dave, did you ever have any really scary experiences in submarines?
Yeah, so the submarines, one time we lost power on the submarine. And what people don't know about on submarines is that they don't float, right? They actually need to move forward in order to stay at a certain depth. So the moment that you lose power is the moment that you start to sink. Now, we have tanks and ballast tanks, emergency blow that can pop you up to the top and everything like that. But what a lot of people don't know is when you do an emergency blow, you don't pop up to the top and stay there. You actually shoot right through the water, come out of the water, crash down, and then you go further down, okay? You don't just pop up on the top and there you are, nice. You actually go deep afterwards. We had a moment, though, where we lost power. I was actually sleeping, so I didn't know what was going on. But my bed, the way that my feet were towards the front of the submarine. My head was towards the back. But I woke up and my feet were touching the wall and I was almost standing because we were sinking that fast. And it's pitch black and I have no idea what's going on. I just woke up. I didn't hear any alarms. I didn't, I might have woken up to an alarm. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, like, are we about to die? Like, and I have no idea what's going on. I don't know. It was like the worst feeling in the world. And that's actually, that moment has haunted me a lot. I might have had like a night terror once about it, later on, because just that level of helplessness and unease and knowing like at any moment we could crush and I'll die right here and I just won't have been any the wiser. So that really hurt. I once fought a fire in my underwear, because that was an alarm that went off, and we're actually our own firefighters on the submarine. And I jumped out of the rack. That's what they call it, is a rack. I jumped out of the rack and immediately donned my EAB, which is the breathing unit. Didn't throw on my clothes because I could see the fire. We unraveled the hose and started fighting it. There I am in my underwear, just fighting a fire. I got in trouble for that because apparently the suit we wear the suit, they call it a poopy suit. It sounds terrible, but it's supposed to be somewhat flame retardant kind of, but no, it's not. But needless to say, though, it was one of those times where I got reprimanded for doing it, but at the same time, I think everybody in the board was like, I'd much rather him do that than to wait, because we got the fire under control. So.
Wow. I think one of the reasons people struggle if they have a fear of flying, like in planes, is that helplessness, that powerlessness that you talk about. You're just a passenger in the plane. You feel like you've absolutely got no control.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the hardest things, though, is I woke up, like at least on a plane, you can see, you can look out a window, you can see what's going on. I was in pitch black, and I had nothing, no noise, nothing. So just imagine waking up in pitch black and you're standing and things are sinking and you have no idea how close you are to crush depth. That was something. Needless to say, I didn't enjoy being on a submarine. It was not my favorite thing in the world. I jokingly say that if I die and go to hell, the devil knows where to send me. So
yeah. How did you deal with the confinement? Because I imagine it's pretty cramped there.
It is. I was actually on a ballistic submarine, and ballistic submarines, so that's an Ohio-class submarine. They are the ones that I can neither confirm nor deny that they have, 24 nuclear missile bays on it. But because of that so-called missile bay, it's a very large submarine. It's a lot larger than the fast attacks or any of the smaller ones out there, because it's really just a floating flotilla of firepower, I guess. But we used to sleep in between the missile tubes. I've slept under a torpedo. There's 100+ men on there, and quite frankly, I think the living conditions is only meant for like 70. We had somebody on suicide watch once because of a problem. And when someone's on suicide watch, that means somebody else has to watch them. And that's now you lost 2 people on the workforce, and it hurts. Like, you lose 2 people, and your sleep goes from like maybe 4 hours a day to 2 hours a day, because you have to cover for that, because the submarine has to operate, and we have to have all the things going on, and so it was rough.
Wow. When Netflix make a movie about your life, Dave, those will be good parts of the movie to put in there.
Well, they might go after the international arms dealing part. The submarines might be a little fun, but I was actually an international arms dealer for the U.S. government for many years.
Wow, okay.
So there's a lot of fun adventures there. I did a lot of operations in the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia. So
on the next interview, Dave, we'll go right into that stuff.
Yeah, it's actually funny. If you Google international arms dealer, the first article should be a Forbes article that pops up, #1, and it's all about what I did there, which is funny because I still get emails all the time from people that's like, well, how do I become an international arms dealer? I'm like, hey, whoa.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a fun, we'll say that the life in the military was a very interesting time.
Sure. So Dave, back to something slightly less dangerous, digital business. So when you kind of were starting out and you were, as we all are, ignorant kind of newbie right at the beginning, what was the biggest single challenge that you had to overcome to get going, to get some momentum and get moving?
Well, I think one of the reasons why I was able to succeed is because a challenge that a lot of people run into, somehow I got over it. And what that is just fear of failing. A lot of people, like, when they decide that they want to start building a website or they want to start building an online business, it's as if they're prepared that they're going to fail. But they're going to try it. And they put their toe in the water and they're like, oh, it's too cold, and they run away. And for me, on the other hand, I don't know if it was like blissful ignorance. I was just like, okay, then I'll do better the next time. So a story I love to tell people is the moment that I decided to really give it a go. There's actually a book I have right over there. My wife gave it to me, and it's a terrible book, and it's called Internet Millionaire. And it's all about, like, how to make money online. And I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to do everything this book says, no matter what. And I don't care if it sounds stupid or whatever. I'm just going to do everything this book says.
Yep.
And I did it. And you know what I did? I burned like a month and a half of hard work, and I made $2. Now, most people would have been like, this is stupid. See, I can't do it. They may say this is for somebody else, not for me. Me, on the other hand, I was like, I just turned $2 out of thin air, and I think I can do better next time. So immediately I went to task and I did it again. But this time I cut some corners. I improved on things. I found parts of this that I liked, and then I really dug in harder. And the next time I did it, I made $5. But you know what, though? It was really dumb, because for me, I was like, I just doubled. If I do it again, maybe I'll make 10. And that was just the way I approached it. And I think the big reason for approaching it wasn't because it was a hobby or something I wanted to dabble in. My goal was to be home with my children. Like, I needed it to work. It wasn't something that was a nice to have. It was, I'm going to let down my family if I don't do this. And so if I saw progress, then I was going to do what was necessary to continue that progress. And I really think that that's the reason why I was able to succeed at the level I have, and whereas so many people don't, is because you might look at a lot of people's success. You might see the end result. This person is now making, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and we see the things they did right. But what people don't see is that first website that made me $2. And then the second website that made me $5. We don't get to hear about that, and so we always think that if we don't knock it out of the park on the first swing, then we're not meant to be, we're not meant to be successful. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I think there's a website, I don't think it's .com, but it's First Versions, and it has the very, very first website of like Twitter, Facebook, all these, mega companies now, and the first websites, they just suck really bad. They're horrible.
Yeah.
But they started there, and actually, the way I sort of talk about it to people is if you think of the iPhone 1.0 in, I think it's 2007, you can't get to iPhone 13 or 14 without iPhone 1. You have to have a starting point from which to learn from and evolve and iterate and all of that. And what I see a lot of is, if we think of this principle of trial and error, well, a lot of people never get to the trial part. They don't even try. They just talk themselves out of it far too soon. They expect the results far too quickly. And if you think about something like someone studying to be a doctor, like in the US, I think they have to study for like 8 to 10 years. And then if you were really applied yourself to digital business, I think in anything from 3 to 12 months, you could have made major progress if you really knuckle down and really disciplined.
Absolutely. An even easier way is you can go to YouTube. Go to your favorite YouTuber, okay? Somebody who's really professional. Go find their first video. I mean, it's night and day, the level of quality, not just of the video image, but also how they made their videos. Go to a famous podcaster's podcast. Look at episode 1 and how cringy maybe that first episode is. And that's okay. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's a really easy way to see that people started But the key is they kept going and they kept improving, and I think that's just the real difference maker between it. When I've got a buddy of mine, he lives here, and we were just joking about how in Nashville, I mean, you can't throw a rock without hitting either a country star, a Christian musician, or as I like to throw in there, an online entrepreneur. And I've got a buddy who is actually, he used to play the bass guitar for Stellar Cart, a Christian band, and he wanted to get into blogging. He's actually a phenomenal fly fisherman. And I'm like, all right, so let's do this. But I told him, I'm like, hey, look, if you're going to do this, Nick, you have to flat out say in your mind that I'm going to build this website, I'm going to write, I'm going to do SEO, I'm going to do all these things. But I'm not going to expect any level of success for 1 year. That's what I told him. I was like, if you're ready for that, then let's do this. Now, granted, I think that if somebody who is really, really good at SEO and has major background and experience, I generally think that if you're starting from scratch, you can't expect to see anything for at least 6 months. And that's somebody who's really good at it. So for anybody out there that's like, all right, I'm going to do this, give yourself 1 year of just dedication to it. That's what I like to tell people. And if you can say, I'm ready to do that, then I believe that you're absolutely going to succeed.
Yeah. Can I share a quick non-SEO Facebook hack for you, Dave?
Yeah.
Facebook ad hack. So the way Facebook advertising obviously works is that you pay for your click or whatever the goal is based on the location of the person. So if they're in LA, for example, or New York City, you can expect to pay quite a lot for those clicks. But now we have a very mobile, digital nomad, digital entrepreneur population moving around the world. And something you can do in Facebook is you can set it to find American expats now living in Vietnam, Thailand, anywhere around the world. In your particular, you add your interest, whatever it might be, self-publishing, if that's an interest in Facebook, I'm not sure. And what I've seen with my tests here is you can usually get like 1 cent clicks with Americans living abroad in your target audience.
Nice.
Yeah, 1 cent clicks. That's like year 2000 kind of level on Google.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things I've learned on online marketing in general is that when people start off, like they won't know that. They won't know that little something that you just shared on it. So in Facebook ads, they may do all the wrong things. They may target the LA, and that they're like, well, it's costing me $10, and that's the thing is that you just got to get in there and keep learning and growing.
Yeah.
And maybe that first ad campaign is going to be a bit of a failure, but then as you go, like you, Terry, you have that intuition. You've gained that from knowledge and experience, and now hey, the expats are a phenomenal opportunity. Here's a way that we can really cut it from $10 to cents, and I think that's the difference between the people that are succeeding is they stuck through it, even when it was hard or it felt wrong at first, and they learned and they gained that insight that that really separates people.
Yep. I've gone away from the questions on the script, Dave, so I'll get in huge trouble with marketing team. I better just go back to the script somewhat. Now, you have a bunch of courses and tools on your site. Can you give us a brief explanation of what they do and how they help self-publishers with their business?
Yeah, honestly, that's one of my favorite things that I've done was I started building free online tools on Kindlepreneur. And there was a lot of times where as I was in the self-publishing world, there were times where people were like, oh man, I wish I could do this, or oh, jeepers, this is really hard. And I was like, man, it would be nice if there was a calculator that did this, or it'd be nice if there was a tool that helped you with that. And so I actually found some programmers to help build these tools on Kindlepreneur. And what was amazing about this is that we stopped just being a place of information. We became a place of tools and helping. On top of that, too, it's almost like if anybody's writing an article about how to self-publish and they don't mention some of these tools, they're really hurting their people, that are reading this. Because, like, for example, one of the tools that we have is the Kindle calculator. And what this does is that it allows you to take the Amazon bestseller rank of any book on Amazon. You can put it into this calculator, and it will actually tell you how many books that day have sold. So now an author can go and say, oh, I wonder how much money this author is making. Or I wonder if this kind of book is doing well. And so you can use that calculator. The other big one that we did was we made the book description generator. And what's interesting about book descriptions on Amazon is that you can actually use HTML to make your book description on your book's sales page look different. You can make words bigger, you can make them bold, you can help bullet point, and things like that. The problem is that a mass majority of self-published authors do not know HTML. And others that do, what they don't want to do is make up the HTML, post it on Amazon, and realize, oh no, I forgot to close the bold, and now it's a giant block of bold text, right? So what we did was we created a simple tool where it's a WYSIWYG. It's what you see is what you get.
Yep.
You write in your book description into it, and then you highlight what you want, and you just click a button and it turns it. But the key thing is that we also incorporated Amazon CSS inside of it. So exactly what you see is exactly what it's going to look like on Amazon. And just that simple thing of helping authors be able to easily make beautiful book descriptions was such a flag, planted in the earth. Like, that tool has been used millions of times over the years. And yet we constantly kind of work to improve it. Just recently, we added a new feature where after you've written your book description, you can click a button and it will use AI to try to improve your book description. And so now authors can keep polishing the cannonball here, and on the left, AI tries to make a better one, and they can copy and paste and change as they want, and just keep clicking the button until they have a book description they absolutely love. And so that to me was such a huge thing, because we're really providing value, and at the same time, it made authors want to come back to our website over and over and over again. Every time you go to write your book description, a mass majority of any author out there is using our tool just to make sure it looks good and improve it.
Yep.
If you're curious about which books are making money, people are just constantly coming back and using the website. And that, I think, not only was useful to them, I think that built a lot of brand love and loyalty out there as well.
Great. It's not in our questions, Dave, but I'm curious about your magic 8-ball, crystal ball prediction on AI impact on self-publishing and writing books and things like that.
Yeah, when I try to look at the future on businesses, I like to ask myself, what's going to make Amazon more money? That's usually the best way to approach it, right? And I think that it's in Amazon's best interest to try to stamp out as much of the AI written books as possible. The reason for that is that there is a growing number of books coming from countries that don't speak English as a primary language. And these books are clearly 100% AI generated, and they're not getting cleaned up or improved. If the market on Amazon gets flooded with these low quality books, Amazon's shoppers are going to lose trust in Amazon, and their book market's going to be hurt. So I believe Amazon will probably take some measures to automatically search for AI-generated content and probably flag it, if not maybe kick it out. So I'm not as worried about that. However, though, outside of a market like Amazon, I wouldn't be surprised if like Hollywood starts using AI to start generating scripts. I wouldn't be surprised if large publishing companies maybe start using it to a certain extent. But what I tell authors now is I think that for the true legitimate authors out there, AI can be a phenomenal assistant or maybe even a muse, but I would be wary of using it for large amounts of your own creation, because I think some of the markets out there will block it in time.
Do you see Amazon already getting flooded with those kind of books?
I do.
Okay.
And I just before jumping on this, I was on a 20 books to 50K Facebook group, and somebody posted a picture of a category in Amazon that 8 out of the 10 top books in that category were clearly made, like nonsensical made books by people who clearly didn't, like, just threw stuff into OpenAI or ChatGPT and then pumped it out, as a book. And it was obvious, like it was bad. So I think they're coming in swarms, and I think it's only going to increase in time until Amazon takes action.
Can you share some common mistakes that self-published authors make that you see and how they can avoid them?
Yeah, it kind of goes in line with what we were talking about with websites and SEO. Is that I see a lot of um, I see a lot of authors who try their first book, and when it doesn't succeed, they quit. Like, oh, this was my heart's dream, and this was it. And clearly I'm not a good writer. This is too hard. It's the ones that say, okay, here comes book 2. Here comes book 3. Here comes book 4. The ones that really stick with it. And by the way, each time they do it, they learn something new. They become smarter in something. They get stronger. Great things happen. And that is the difference between those that succeed and don't. I've talked to a couple of New York Times bestselling authors. I've actually been a consultant to authors like Ted Decker, Orson Scott Card. And it's funny is that what people don't realize is it wasn't their first book that made them famous. It wasn't the second, the third, or the fourth. Matter of fact, many of them wrote books that never got published. Okay. And that's where we miss. And so these guys wrote books, couldn't even get out into the world. Then they finally got one out into the world, and nobody's ever heard of it. Then the second one, and so we as authors need to understand is you can't just jump in and say, I'm going to make it with one, and if I don't, then it's not for me. Because if that's the case, I almost feel like you're playing the lottery, and maybe you got a lottery ticket and you win, but that's about it. You need to jump into it in the line of, I'm going to build a skill and a career here, and I'm going to work towards it. And the people who approach it like that are the ones that are doing incredible.
Yep. I mean, another mistake I see, Dave, and I've been a writer, professional writer a lot of my life, and I've made films and done lots of stuff like that. When you actually create a big project, like a film or a book or whatever, you use a huge amount of juice creating that thing. And when you get to the end of it, the tank is pretty empty and you're kind of out of gas to actually now do what is arguably the much more important step of marketing that thing. But there's no energy left. Yes. And you don't have the resources. You don't have a team. You don't have an agency or company behind you or whatever. It's all up to you as the creator. And I see that the people get to the end of the creation and they're just completely done. They're out of gas and there's no juice left for marketing the thing. So, Absolutely. And of course, when the world then doesn't embrace it because they don't actually even know about it and never heard of it, no marketing, no communication about it, no exposure, they interpret that as a crushing failure and a terrible, disappointing loss. And a lot of people just, like you say, pack it up and move on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I like to tell people, especially when you are trying to learn how to do this, learning with books, learning how to write and improving your writing skill is incredibly important. Also, learning how to market is just as important as well. And so when I first started, the way that I worked was that I separated the two, where I would spend, I would actually get up at 4:30 in the morning and I would write, because I'd make my coffee, and then at 5 I'd start writing. I'd write from 5 to 7 every morning, no matter what. I would not allow myself to check social media, check my email. It would all be turned off on my computer when I went to bed at night so that when I woke up, I wasn't distracted. I would get amazing writing done in those 2 hours. Then at nighttime, okay, before I went to bed, that's where I would sit down and start reading blog posts and learning about the marketing. And I would start planning and practicing. I'd take the courses, the Facebook ads course or the Amazon ads course, those kind of things. And that way, I was always working on my craft and building the product, which is the books.
Yep.
And at the same time, improving myself and preparing myself. Otherwise, I see a lot of authors get in there, they just focus on the writing, and then they release it, and they're kind of like just hoping it picks up. Or there's the ones that almost always focus on learning, and they never actually sit down and write. That balance right there is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, I think Tim Ferriss, when he was a complete nobody and he was about finished 4-hour work week, I think he did something like he went to some big blogging events or something like that, and he talked to the influencers there. A lot of them were really rude to him because he was a nobody and they just thought he was a dork or whatever. But he just got enough of them to take the bait on his pitch, his elevator pitch, I guess. And when he had it finished, or maybe a month or a few months after that, he followed up with these guys, and true to their word, they read the book, they liked it, they promoted it to their audience, and this gave him a big initial jump start. So my point of bringing that up, Dave, is sometimes you got to just be really bold, take initiative, do things like that. And actually, because I've known loads of writers in my life, a lot of them are really introverted. Doing something like that is a million miles out of their comfort zone. But to cut through now, I mean, that was whatever it was, 15 years ago or something, that book came out. Harder now, there's a lot more saturation and more competition, but you've got to be bold and get out there to get noticed.
Yeah, well, one of the little hacks or tricks that I always recommend to people is all you have to do to really get noticed is sign up for somebody's email list and then just hit reply when they send an email. And what I mean by that is it doesn't need to be a reply of like, I have questions or I demand. Just hit a reply and be like, wow, that was really awesome. Thank you so much for that. Or man, this article was great. Or hey, is it okay if I share this? Because what I'll tell you is that they're going to start to see your name and they're going to remember and they're going to think, wow, this person has really enjoyed my content or they have enjoyed what I'm putting out. And that person is going to be building more goodwill than the person that just out of the blue randomly comes at me and says, hey, Dave, would you read my book? I would feel more obligation to take this person seriously and listen to what their offer is because I recognize their name. I've seen them constantly be a good person and, someone who truly has listened and learned. I'm going to work more with somebody who's shown me that they're actually paying attention to the stuff that's coming out than the person who I've never heard of that just out of the blue comes in for an ask.
Yeah, that's great advice. I remember once Frank Kern, who I'm sure you're familiar with, from San Diego, Frank Kern, kind of long-time digital marketer. He once, for a big promotion, he gave out his mobile phone number and he said, anybody who, if you buy his course, I think it was, here's my cell phone number. You can call me up and ask me anything for half an hour. So it sold like thousands and thousands of courses. Do you know how many people actually phoned him up? Zero?
Probably little.
Nobody.
To none. Yep.
They were too intimidated. They didn't reach out. He offered. He left it there. Here's my phone number. You can reach me at any time. Nobody called him.
Yep.
So, there's also that kind of social awkwardness, that little barrier that writers who are normally introverted kind of people, have to overcome to just reach out, just break that, that barrier for people like that. But that's really great advice that you have there. Let me move on, Dave. So how do you feel about being recommended by platforms like Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing? So you've been recommended by them now. Congratulations on that. How does that feel?
Oh, thank you. It's been great. Specifically with Amazon, it's fun, but it's also a little weird. So when Amazon recommended my website, and it's funny is in Kindlepreneur itself, I've never had any conversations with Amazon at all, which is kind of weird to me, but that's okay. With Publisher Rocket, I've never had any conversation with Amazon either. With my writing software, Atticus, on the other hand, I've worked with the head of Kindle. We're constantly talking with them. So it's just a weird organization in that respect. But with regards to the time that they recommended Kindlepreneur, it was funny because I had written this article that was about how to choose your keywords for fiction books. Nobody had really tackled this. And 1 week later, Amazon not only recommended that people go read that article and use it so that they can sell more books, which is totally cool for them to say it that way. But then I also noticed, too, on their FAQ page, they changed their FAQ to reflect everything I had in the article. So I was like, so on the one hand, I was like, hey, that's great. On the other hand, I was like, oh, you even used the exact terminology I did for those for those sections. So I was like, all right. And they actually just did it again. This time they didn't recommend the article, but they did just change their entire category discussion page. And there's a couple of phrases that I know absolutely were things that I came up with. So I'm glad they're reading my stuff, but it's a little weird and off that it's your company that I'm talking about, but you're reading mine to actually put it in there. But it's funny, though, another website of mine was actually just featured on Joe Rogan's podcast. It was really cool. They were talking about something. They brought up the website, and they were using it to kind of discuss something. And so it's really fun, especially since it wasn't me because I'm not a Joe Rogan fan. But it was cool when a family member said, your website's on the Joe Rogan podcast. I was like, oh, cool. So it's just been neat when those things have been brought up. or mentioned, or it's validating. I guess is a really good word.
Are you seeing, because internet marketing is famous for copycats, Dave, are you seeing any copycat businesses trying to copy your moves?
Not in the self-publishing world. I think a lot of it, because I think maybe some of that really comes from the fact that in the self-publishing and author world, it's just a heinous crime to copy somebody's information, right? Copyright infringement is a big deal to us. And so I don't see a lot of rip-offs. I've only been ripped off once, and that was a long time ago. But otherwise, though, I think that industry is it's a really taboo thing. Now, I'm in other industries, and I've definitely seen that ripped off. I've seen designs absolutely copied. I've seen, data structures just ripped, almost hacked to a point and then put on somewhere else. But not so much in the writing world, which is nice.
Even copying your business model and going after the same audience without stealing your content?
I mean, so if somebody else is trying to rank for the same keywords, I really don't see them as competition. I kind of like to look at the industry of like rising tides, raise all ships that have integrity. So, all the boats, they're going to rise if they don't have holes in them. So I like that little with integrity part to it. And I see a lot of great people out there in the self-publishing community that are really just trying to help authors. And sometimes I rank number one for it. Sometimes they rank number one for it. Sometimes, they change their data or their information to kind of reflect something I put out. I'm okay with that because I don't see it as a whole, let's get Dave, or anything like that. I just think that sometimes on Kindlepreneur, because of Publisher Rocket, we have so much data on Amazon, it's not even funny. We are a giant data collection system, to be honest. It's the number one book marketing software in the world that was listed by MarketWatch. And we're now shifting into the whole, we're sifting through all the data to say, okay, Amazon said that, but the data shows that's not correct. Or, this is what's happening to books when they do this, because we just have all this data. So there's a lot of times where I'm coming out with an article that actually is discussing what's going on in Amazon. And to me, it's totally fine for somebody to take that information and craft an entire article, recommending something different because of the information we come out with. And all the author wins. Somebody's doing a better job of explaining something that we may have discovered and brought out. And so I don't see that as a problem. I just don't see a lot of nefarious characters in that industry. I think everybody's just trying to help authors, and that to me is a major win.
Yeah, and having that raw data is kind of the moat around your business as well, protecting you, because it's a hard, expensive game to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just allows us to learn and to actually come at it with really good suggestions because we're backed by data, so it's not subjective, which is really nice.
Great. Now, Dave, can you share some success stories from authors who've used your services to improve their self-publishing journey?
Like actual successes from it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I say that the people that have worked towards 4 books, usually those people are already hitting their success. But I've seen some really interesting, different successes, okay? Not just from the book sales. A long time ago, I was working with a lawyer out of Seattle, and this person actually worked specifically in the industry of DUIs. And he had all these notes, and he wanted to compile it into a book. And what he wanted to do was just make the book be something where when people come into his law group to figure out which lawyer they're going to use, he would give them a book instead of a card, right? And the book was basically titled something along the lines of like what to do if you got a DUI. So just by making this book, this guy now stood out from every other lawyer in the industry because nobody else was a published author. And as a matter of fact, he was able to work to make sure he was a best-selling author. He got his book in a specific category, only needed a couple sales, and that gave him bestseller status. So this guy is now a best-selling author on the subject. You walk into his and he gives you a book that you're not going to throw in the trash. You're actually, because this is valuable, you want to read this. And on top of that too, it's really hard to throw a book in the trash, not a card. So his clientele went through the roof. He landed just about everybody who walked in. And then on top of that, because of his book, he was asked to speak at the Moms Against Drunk Driving. And he became the speaker in Seattle for this subject matter because he's a best-selling author on the subject. His business just exploded. So there's the authors that are making a lot of money from their books, and it's generally, I like to say, it's expected on your fourth, and if you can walk into it like that in mind, you will see success. But if you're like, if I hit on the first try, or not, that's going to be the telltale. No. So you have a lot of authors that do that, but then you have the others that are using their book to either get their foot in the door, to build up their career, to make them, give them that bestseller status that gives them the speaking gigs or the opportunities to be on podcasts, or just to convince people that they're the ones. I mean, I another example on this, and then I'll let it roll. But we're building out an office right now for one of my companies, and I've constantly always had a problem that when I go to work with the contractors, the architects, the designers, etc. Now I've started to understand the process, but before I didn't understand all the titles, the names of people, etc. And so I told the general contractors, when I'm talking to all the general contractors, if somebody had handed me a book on what to expect, and just what the process is, they would have been my general contractor, just right there in a heartbeat. So anyways, so that particular person is working on his book because he agrees constantly. He gets questions all the time that could be solved in just getting a book. And at the same time, if he's a best-selling author on, office building construction or something like that, that just makes him even more special than every other general contractor out there.
Yeah, can create a lot of credibility. Give them a lot of credibility.
Oh, absolutely. And also the fact that this person helped me with something makes me want to work with them more than the person that just handed me a card.
Sure, definitely. So Dave, what do you think is the future for self-publishing industry, and what are your plans to evolve Kindlepreneur to meet those changes?
Yeah, so I think one of the big areas that there's going to be a lot of question marks is like we talked about, which is AI. And my feeling on that is that AI can be a phenomenal tool to help legitimate authors get more out and do better. I do think it's a very good area for people to study. I've been spending a lot of time in it. I'm actually partnering up on another company that's AI generation, but it's in a completely different industry. But I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse to best understand AI. I think that a lot of publishing companies, the good thing about publishing companies is they're very slow to pick up on new technology. So I don't think that there's going to be a crazy change in the major publishing company world, but I think a lot of self-published authors will probably be on the forefront of it. With regards to Kindlepreneur, we've just been looking for ways to use the technology to help. So like I talked about the book description generator, we just added AI inside of it. And with regards to Publisher Rocket, we're actually using a lot of AI generation to help improve our machine learning and forecasting, which has been phenomenal. And so yeah, there's just a couple of really interesting things, but I'd say 80% of the future really is going to be dependent on how AI takes.
Yep. Nice. On a personal level, Dave, what does success look like for you? How do you measure it?
Honestly, and I know this sounds like a cheesy statement, but I'm really, really gung-ho about this, is so long as I'm better today than I was yesterday, then I'm on the path towards success. I enjoy, what I love most about being an entrepreneur is the sheer fact that there's always something to learn. There's always very uncomfortable places to be, and that you have to learn to grow. And for me, just being able to get up and to work and improve, that's a huge mark towards success for me.
Nice. What advice would you give to someone just starting out in self-publishing? I think we've covered this quite a bit, I think, in this interview. I'm going to change my question. I'm allowed to do that. Yeah. I've got the freedom to do that, Dave. It's all right.
Sounds good.
So you're obviously a change seeker. You're an entrepreneurial guy. For you, what is a change seeker? What does that mean for somebody?
Well, in my software companies, I have this rule called I call it the ABBA rule, which is always be adapting. And I would like to challenge every one of my organizations to never sit back on their on their heels, because so many things change, so many opportunities occur, that if you don't adapt, if you don't keep your eyes open for that new thing and you don't adapt, one day you're going to wake up and realize everybody else has passed you by. And so, like, for example, we talked about using AI inside of Publisher Rocket. It would have been very easy for me and my team to just be like, oh, it's AI, it's only writing, that doesn't matter, that's not going to affect us. When all of a sudden, just by the fact that we were looking at it and saying, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we see what we can do with this? That we never would have discovered this whole new system that's going to make Rocket infinitely better. And if we hadn't done that, somebody else might have. And so that could leave you in the dust. And the same thing with self-publishing. So many things are changing. It's really important to always look at that. And that, like I said, going back to definition of success, that's what I love most about being an entrepreneur, is it's all about the changes and, being ready and, always be adapting.
Yeah, I love it. For me personally, what I love about entrepreneurship is it's the power of using your imagination to create a different future. So you did that with your transition from the military to where you are now in Nashville. I'm trying to do it with my dog shelter and dog foundation, and trying to create an entirely different future for homeless dogs by having a great shelter with big yards and very happy dogs who are extremely well cared for and all of that, and presenting kind of a model, a prototype of how every shelter in the world should be in the future. And if I just did all that on a PowerPoint, people would look at that and go, yeah, great idea, can't happen. But they can actually come to our shelter. It's about 30 minutes from the office where I'm sitting now. And actually, I just came from there before this interview. People can come there. They're blown away by how friendly and happy the dogs are. They're much more adoptable. They're healthier. And the idea is that people can see it on social media or come from around the world. We have volunteers come from all over the world, Chile and Argentina and Australia and stuff, over here to Eastern Europe. They see it and they take back that experience to their countries and cities and area, and they say, look at the shelters there and say, guys, why don't you do it like that? That's the future. And gradually, we hope that'll be a kind of ripple effect and bring about that change.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awesome.
Now, Dave, I've got one quick I snuck in one quick unscripted WPX question here, because you're a long-time WPX guy. What has been your experience with WPX so far?
Yeah, well, so there's a couple things. One is that I almost rarely have any issues, but when I do, the support team's phenomenal. I think I've been hacked before, or or had some kind of problem on one of my websites going down, and immediately jumping on support and them somehow just magically fixing it, even though sometimes maybe it's my fault, has been great. The best thing about that too is that with some of my websites, like if my website goes down for an hour, I'm losing thousands of dollars. And so having that quick response and that support, I think, is the most important thing of all.
Yeah, I mean, that is our policy, and we implemented that like maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, that we can teach if you want to, we can send you an article if you want, but isn't it better if we just fix it for you? We can usually do it in a few minutes. And I never understood that thing in the hosting business, how they just send you a knowledge base article and expect you to figure it all out. Find the solution. I mean, you may never find the solution from a complicated article and apply it. And the support guys are troubleshooting these things all the time. They know what to look for. Usually it's a quick fix and they know what to do. And on Trustpilot now, we have close to 3,000 5-star reviews. And almost all of them just echo what you have said about that speed of support and the fact that they fix things for customers, which at the time we brought it in, that was really radical and revolutionary. A few other companies are doing it now, but at the time that was a really big deal.
Yeah, it's like I said, I'm a pretty tech savvy person.
Yep.
I run a couple of software companies, and
well, you better be.
There's a lot of times in the hosting world where I'm like, nope, I don't understand this. Like, can somebody please do something? So that I really mean it when I say that it is a great thing to have people that, like, I could jump on. They're always there, jump on it. They immediately respond. No crazy waiting queue. And I'm like, I got a problem. Okay, give me a second. Okay, you're all fixed. Oh, thank goodness. I didn't even have to say what the problem was. Okay, cool.
Dave, it's been a pleasure again. I really appreciate your time today. And the team here will update you on when our stuff goes live, and you can have a look at it all. Really enjoy the interview. Maybe next time we'll do the international arms dealing lifestyle.
There you go. I did it legally. I was the legal guy.
Legally. Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good.
Yep. Have a great day there, Dave, and thank you again.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.